Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year indeed. We are coming to you from Minnesota where it is, oh my god, why are we living in New not suburbia, we already live there. Why are we living in New Siberia?
Well, one of our first New Year's resolutions is to become truer YouTube reviewers. And one part of that requirement is to have the shelf full of media sitting behind you.
And yes, so many movies and games. Half of the games he hasn't even tried yet.
I'm kind of busy.
Yeah, busy with real life, but hey, collecting nonetheless. Hey, I haven't seen half of the movies that I have, but
well, actually, I don't buy movies that I haven't seen.
I only do that usually if it's a $5 DVD Target deal or something.
No, I don't buy DVDs anymore either. I'm strictly Blu-ray.
Strange man indeed. Well, speaking of movies, 2017, it was actually a pretty good year.
Yes,
a pretty solid year, no less, but we did have a good variety of good pictures, and it seemed to have more variety than last year, although last year was still had a temptation to be branded as as a sequel era, like 2015, but it had good sequels. 2016 seemed to have just that noticeable drop in consistent quality. With 2017, despite most of the allegations that still race around Hollywood today, we were actually given a fairly consistent basis of movies literally all throughout the year. There were good movies in the early winter this year, there were good movies in the spring, there were good movies in the summer, and there were good movies in the, late winter. Well, fall, I guess you consider it, but why do so many people still consider December fall? It's ridiculous! But yes, this year has been way more interesting for movies as a whole, but also for specifically us. We saw more movies this year than last year. We still had a good variety of both good and bad movies of the year, but hey, when the hell doesn't that happen? That's literally why this is a hobby, and a hobby we're damn passionate about. So passionate about that we still are continuing a theme that we started last year, known as our best and worst movies. And, well, since we usually carry the principle around New Year's that we look from the good times of 2017 and have faith that those experiences will continue in the following year. And that's why we want to address our best movies right now and remember the good times, the laughter, the thrills, sometimes even the scares of the previous year that we have just experienced. So, hey, we ain't gonna cut to any more bullshit. We're gonna start off with our top 5 best movies of 2017. Chris, why don't you take us away?
All right. Well, my number 5 is Wind River. And this is a movie that probably flew under the radar for a lot of people, but not for me. I ran to this movie arms wide open. Not just because it had Jeremy Renner in it, but also because it was written and directed by the same guy who wrote Sicario and Hell or High Water, which was my favorite movie last year. I believe his name is Taylor Sheridan, although I don't think I'm pronouncing that right. But the nice thing about this movie is that it's, well, I guess I should explain. You asked me a while ago what I thought of Jeremy Renner. Why is he one of my favorite actors?
He's one of Chris's boys, and for all of you people that don't know, a boy in Hollywood, aside from the ones that were not good, treated poorly as boys, but a boy in Hollywood is like a male actor that is consistently in a lot of movies and productions that you love, and you specifically love their like performance traits, but they're not like world renowned or multi award winning. So people like Jeremy Renner, Michael Cera, as well as who else are your boys?
Well, Leonardo DiCaprio was one.
Yeah, a former boy. As opposed to my boys like Jonah Hill, Michael Biehn from the 80s, and who else? Formerly Gene Wilder. But yeah.
Well, the reason I like Jeremy Renner as much as I do is not only is that he's very believable in everything he does, but he makes it look so damn effortless. Even in write-off roles like Hawkeye from Avengers or Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, he never gives anything less than an entertaining performance, and that holds true in this movie as well. Here he plays a wildlife tracker working with an FBI agent to investigate a murder in a Native American reservation site. The setting of this movie really is one of the true stars of the movie, because it is absolutely gorgeous. You know, you get these beautiful vistas. It's shot so perfectly, and well, I mean, everything's covered in so much snow, you just get chilled from looking at it. And it lends itself to creating an atmosphere of isolation and tensity. They also use this environment to comment on the cruelty and poor living conditions of Native American reservation sites, which might sound heavy-handed, but it actually weaves its way quite nicely into the unfolding mystery and character development throughout the movie. One thing I don't really like about this movie is the fact that the resolution kind of creeps up on you and then just goes off like a gunshot. We spend so much time building up to it, it just happens so quickly. So, not quite what I was expecting. And I suppose overall it doesn't innovate the murder mystery crime drama that much, but for what it sets out to do, it does very, very well. And sometimes that's all you gotta do to stand out amongst your competition. Hence to why it's on my list. You know, and if you haven't seen it yet, please do. It's well worth checking out.
Yes, and we were going to the state fair, the Minnesota State Fair, a couple days after he saw this movie. Either that or that was just the first time that we had hung out after you saw it. Like, he was raving about it constantly, and well, I sort of presumed why, because of Jeremy Renner and him being a fan. But it did also seem to have a very mysterious, dark tone to it that a mysterious dark tone that you could take seriously, because it dealt with a real story as well as real issues. Although, did you say that you thought the symbolism might have been a little bit too obvious? Possibly too obvious.
Well, at first it did, but then like it was explained to me better separately.
Okay.
At first I didn't quite understand what they were going for at the end, but then someone else kind of gave me a different perspective on it, and now I don't mind.
Okay, absolutely, but I kind of wanted to see this movie because it did seem obviously independent, but with that also comes the attention to detail, the originality, and the execution of it as well. So I did have a want to see this movie, but as opposed to other thrillers that I thought, thrillers I've been disappointed by recently, from my understanding, could have learned from this movie. So I actually do want to see it. Put that on our Blu-ray nights or whatever. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Jeremy Renner for the win.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and on to me. My number 5 choice for this year is The Disaster Artist. Yes, the most recent movie. Well, one of the most recent movies we just saw. And it's not only because I'm a seeming fan of the Room, but mostly because The Disaster Artist took a genre that seemed to have a bit of a dying edge. The making of the visual representation of the making of a project. I still love the behind the scenes and like the mechanics of how a motion picture is made out, but it hadn't seemed to be done to this scale or to this likability since its likable its possible inspiration, Ed Wood. But what also comes with this is James Franco's matched passion to his main character, Tommy Wiseau. James Franco's performance won me over big time as soon as I first saw him in it. It's die-hard hilarious. Well, maybe not for some people. We'll get to that in a minute. But I thought it was funny from almost minute one all the way through. Mostly because it still kept a serious tone with the story that they were trying to portray, but luckily the real life story as well as the story associated with the Disaster Artist's material, the book that was written by other great element of it, Greg Sestero, both him and Dave Franco. Also, I loved this. Also, I still loved that this was a comedy, but it still had a very followable story, even though it's still well known, even to people who have just seen the movie and, well, The Room, and looked up the tragic history of it. And that's another thing that I actually did contemplate after we made that video. And I sort of made an argument that it wasn't like poignant, but poignant in that definition that I had assumed with life-changing ideas or the expression of something that's timeless. There can be an expression of timelessness, but it doesn't have to be to that severity. It's just the real issue of feeling bad for these people who, again, they have so much pride, they have so much drive to be what they love. Tommy Wiseau, with his idiocy, still amazes me with how they've made this project, his mannerisms and how he treats his crew. But James Franco gives him sort of a tragic trait to the character as well, because you still feel bad for Tommy Wiseau when he's listening to the first reaction of his life's work, everything that he put his life into. But even still, there is another poignant message with just change your perspective, change your perception, and you can see that you can still make a message to the world. You can still make an impact on the world. It just might not be your original vision. That's what I loved out of this. The script, the direction, I love their performances. They're brothers, but James and Dave Franco's chemistry is still great in this. And yeah, if you want to know more about it, you can see one of our most recent videos that we had of it. But yeah, even after seeing it after the hype, this was the one movie that I was amazingly hyped for this year, and it really paid off. Despite this guy, it was one of the best cinema experiences of the year, and we got to see it in IMAX.
Joke on it, bitch. Okay. Yeah. All right. Cool. My number 4 is Logan. For me, this was hands down the best comic book movie of the year. I mean, by a country mile. It wasn't even close. You guys by now know the ruts I think comic book movies have been stuck in as of late, thanks to Disney's Marvel. I've made my opinion on that quite clear. When you're a comic book movie, you're greeted at the door by an usher who, with his signature white glove, delicately hands you a pamphlet. And in this pamphlet is a strict set of guidelines and rules that you have to adhere to if you want to be a success in this industry. You have to make sure your story is as inconsequential as possible, because you got to leave yourself open for crossovers and sequels. You have to overstuff it with comedy, because God forbid you make your audiences feel anything that's not laughter. your main character has to be a clown supported by comedic reliefs, because you just can never have enough of that, can you? And don't bother with any interesting themes, character arcs, or world building, because your audience are all a bunch of idiots. They can't be bothered to process that kind of crap. Are you nuts? Logan takes that pamphlet, rolls it up, and shoves it down the usher's throat, and says, "Shut up and watch me while I work." That's the best way to describe Logan. Now, I'll be honest here. I know Logan is not that original in the grand scheme of movies or comic book stories as a whole, but in this day and age, my God, is it a breath of fresh air. And even though I could make out most of what was going to happen in this movie, that still doesn't mean it wasn't very, very well done. And like I said with Wind River, sometimes that's all you gotta be to really stand out amongst your competition. It also helps when your competition is a bunch of garbage, but I digress. My favorite thing about Logan is the fact that it's a comic book movie that is not afraid to make you feel sadness and grief. It doesn't hide behind comedy to avoid having to deal with some truly depressing moments. I mean, you really see some of your favorite heroes slowly dying in front of you. But they also use that to their advantage as well, because they, despite their old age, and despite them being well past their prime, they're still kicking ass with this unbreakable tenacity. And that's what you really admire about them. It's kind of a painful reminder that at the end of the day, some of your heroes are still people, and their time in this world is limited, and it's what they choose to do with that time that is ultimately what is going to define them. It's a beautiful take on the stagnant comic book movies of nowadays, but it's also just a lovely swan song to these characters and the actors that brought them to life. Whoever they find to replace Hugh Jackman, I wish them the best of luck. But just like with replacing Hellboy, it's never going to be the same again. And I mean, James McAvoy isn't a bad Professor Xavier, but let's be honest, he's no Patrick Stewart. And speaking of things never being the same again, Disney bought Fox.
Wah, wah.
So think of this as a funeral service.
So alright, I've had my time. Close my eyes, let the death bells chime.
Because whatever interesting, different comic book movies that were in the making, it's gone. Never again. Forget about it.
They already finished Deadpool 2. There's hope.
They're gonna take their scissors to it, I swear.
They've already put out the trailer. I think they've already finished shooting.
That's what we thought about Justice League. You know how many reshoots and reduxes they had to do for that movie?
Jesus Christ.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. Disney, you can't do. I mean, I'm not gonna say Fox was like this immaculate, perfectionists of their Marvel movies as well.
Hell no, they made some of the stupidest comic book movies ever.
Well, right, but also what I liked mostly about them in this context is the fact that they dared to be different. Marvel, like Disney's Marvel, is not gonna try that in the slightest. They've got a formula. They got a money making formula, and they're gonna stick to it until it stops making them money.
Aside from that fact, this was still, even if that fact is true, this still remains a damn good final standing for Fox Marvel comic book movies.
It does. It really does.
And it stands good with us because, no fucking joke, my number 4 is also Logan. So yeah, literally
say what your thoughts on it.
Oh well, you still hit every single pitch there, because this movie it was a serious comic book movie that knew how to take its story and its characters and its audience seriously. Seriously, guys. Well, but that's the one word that you can use to describe this movie. It's serious. It's serious about the lead. Its lead character, who is iconic, who has lasted for many years. But since Jackman did so good for looking the role and for also portraying the role, he goes out on a fucking high note in this movie. It is also a simple story. Some of the X-Men movies are still criticized for their complicated plot lines. Am I wrong?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, they've gotten criticized for complicated plot lines. This just sets it in a different location, but also in a different timeline. This is also taking a question into account. What would happen if literally the last mutant was fucking Wolverine? What if he is the last mutant that can ever walk the face of the earth? There will be no more, and the idea and symbolism for human difference will have no meaning, at least in this world. It still teaches us this, but also it still instills the idea of hope in the end. Even though everything can seem still tragic and dire and possibly the end of your race, there will still always be a fighting chance. There's still always hope for the future. And that comes from a very serious tone and direction from, luckily returning to form, James Mangold, who has also still been known for making not necessarily quirky action movies, but still having like a specific twist on action movies. One of them was Copland with Sylvester Stallone, Harvey Keitel, Ray Liotta. Mostly 50-50 movie where you either think it's boring or you think it's actually still pretty sharp. But he's also known for other movies like Night and Day with Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz and just being campy and too simple and being boring. Luckily, he returns to form with this by recognizing the material that he has and recognizing the possibilities of taking real consequences intact. And they treat death very serious in this also. Because, again, they know their characters, so they know how to write a good story around it.
Consequences. Imagine that.
Even though no movie is perfect, we still had points where some of the kids didn't seem the most interesting, and some of them didn't take their powers into account when trying to combat against their attackers.
That was my biggest complaint. Is like these kids are running for the border. I believe it's the Canadian border.
Yes, Canada.
Okay,
of Canada. You need this there
because Canada likes mutants. Americans don't because we're idiots, I guess. But
we're radical idiots who will shoot you as soon as you step.
But it's like, why aren't you kids all had superpowers? That would have probably made this very easy. But it's like only when their backs are against the wall. It's like, okay, now we'll use them. Really?
Well, they use them, obviously, but that's also not to say that the direction knows what to make important and what to leave off to the side. They still focus on Logan in that main battle, and every single detail of, oh my god, he's hurt, he's fighting back, he's hurt, fight. But they make sure that they keep the audience completely intact with the action, feeling everything, and knowing the circumstances. Mm-hmm. That's what makes a good action movie. When you're able to get a person invested, you're able to get them invested in your characters, what is happening, and how well they can show extra stuff. The visuals in this are good, but it's not only because of the increased amount of gore and violence, but it's mostly put on by the idea that it doesn't necessarily enforce a true reality in it. Like, this is what happens. You bleed constantly. You can get limbs hacked off. Death is painful. But with that R rating, you can still put on an adult show without it being like a bloodbath, vomit in your mouth, Michael Bay shit show. Michael Bay doesn't even use blood anyway. Computers! All the right notes.
Yep. So, my number 3 is a movie you haven't even heard of, I don't think. It's The Red Turtle. I discovered this movie while trying to finish off my Ghibli checklist this year, and despite the Studio Ghibli name being attached to it, it's actually a French film by a director of the name Michael Dudok de Witt. And this film technically came out in 2016, but it only made its way to the US in January of this year, so I'd say it counts as a 2017 film.
It counts, and I also have an explanation for that later.
Okay. So, this film has the distinct feature of, aside from characters occasionally shouting, "Hey," it has no dialogue in the film at all, which might be a major turnoff to a lot of people, but believe me when I say that The Red Turtle is one of the most memorable experiences I had this year. Its basic premise is that a man washes up on the shore of a distant island, and while the island is fairly nice, naturally he wants to get off it. But every time he builds himself a raft and tries to leave, it's busted up by a giant red sea turtle. And that's all I can give away about the plot. But,
okay.
Let's just say things take an unexpected turn.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I need to vouch for Studio Ghibli's animation. They are some of the best in the world, so naturally this film looks fucking gorgeous. But,
I was going to say, he has a collection of Studio Ghibli DVDs.
I do, actually.
Is it up here?
No, it's not.
No, it is. Yeah, it's right here.
Oh, okay, there's a few of them.
Yeah. He's got Castle in the Sky and Nausicaa, his favorite animated movie ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see what the third one is. Oh, Kiki's Delivery Service, which actually I really like.
Yep.
He's so passionate about Studio Ghibli, he actively takes out time for us so that he can show me, like, one by one Studio Ghibli movies, and I've seen almost all of them. But I have a rational and good opinion, but also fairly variable opinion, that's the word I was looking for, on the entire studio's work. But continue.
Okay. Well, the film looks gorgeous regardless, but you can tell it is done under someone's different direction. This is particularly noticeable on the faces. They're very simplified. They have very pointed nose and black dots for eyes, which is surprising to me because you think for a movie with no dialogue they'd want detailed faces, something to be very expressive to, for storytelling purposes. But instead, most of the emotions are conveyed through full body movement, which, since it's Ghibli, it looks great. Emotion really is the key word here because the movie takes you on quite a journey, and it is probably the most emotionally taxing movie I saw this year. When you take dialogue away from a movie, I find that the littlest things can have such bigger impacts overall, and you'll come to appreciate the really cute and funny moments because it detracts from a lot of the bleak and depressing moments. And yes, this movie will mood swing you like no one's business.
Like bipolar disorder.
I guess so. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, a lot of visual metaphors in this movie too that go with this overarching theme of man's relation with nature, or just kind of the idea of a man's purpose and legacy. By the end of the film, I thought about my life. I thought about just what it is to be human. And there's not very many movies that can get me to feel real thoughts like that, or get me to think about real thoughts like that. And it's especially nice that it was an animated movie of all things that tried that. Now, I didn't see very many animated movies this year, good or bad, but I still would. I'm willing to bet that this still would have remained my favorite of the year because it is not often you get animation made for adults that tries to transcend its medium and become something much greater than itself. And The Red Turtle is definitely that. If that interests you at all, please see this movie immediately. A lot of people might pass it off as dull because it has no dialogue. Some people might say it's pretentious because of its artistry. Some might say it's really fucking weird for other things.
for most Studio Ghibli's charm.
Well, for things. I can't say what specifically.
Gotcha.
But if you give this movie a chance, if you really pay attention to what you're seeing and what's happening, I think you're going to find something very special.
Okay, my number 3 choice for this year is Get Out. And oh my god, the story behind this. So, well, Get Out, loved it. But, oh the irony, oh the irony. I saw this movie, I think about a week after it premiered. After the weekend of its premiere, so it was like late February. And the theater that we were at was still packed. Like, it was many people. It was up at Showplace.
Okay.
Many people, but in particular, there was a whole line of black people, African Americans, but the thing was, they were really loud. They were making noise. There was a possibility that they brought in their own food, but they just would not shut up. Even when the movie started, they actually had security from the theater had to come in and talk them down. They still wouldn't calm down. They had to bring in the cops, and this movie got stopped. I think it was about 20 to 30 minutes into it, but they had to cut the reel so that they could escort everybody out. And during the whole time, they were saying, "Oh, it's just like the movie! It's just like the movie! Get out! Get out!" And I'm sorry for laughing, but it is so ironic.
Didn't you tell me that someone said, it's like, oh yeah, the black people getting kicked out of the all-black movie?
That's exactly what they were saying!
But what's funny about that is that Get Out wasn't even an all-black movie. And I was thinking,
it was not!
I was like, did you think this was Moonshot? Or what was that movie called? Moonlight? Did you think this was Moonlight?
But no, they only focused on the main premise of it, just being
there's 3 black people in this whole movie.
I think there only is 3 black people.
Or four.
No,
four.
5.
5, okay.
Yeah.
Well, regardless, it's not an all-black movie, not even close.
But it's still persecution of the blacks.
Yeah, I know.
But needless to say, this movie still won me over. And not only because it got me a discount coupon for my next film there, but also because it was fucking good. It was so... Okay, I'm a relatively big horror fan, and I brought my influence of horror to this guy when we were about 13 or 14, when I first started, when I finally had cable.
He did. I went from being terrified of horror movies to thinking, wow, these are really stupid.
And the movie to do that was Halloween 6: The Curse of Michael Myers.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, though. I love a good horror movie.
A good horror movie can be amazing. It can be great. For me, last year, it was Don't Breathe. Well, disagreements aside, Get Out was still a damn good, creepy movie. And, well, even though it also brings real life satire to a real life subject, it still managed to be entertaining within its own story. And goddamn creepy it is. It's just creepy, the idea that someone is powerless. Someone is powerless at your entire whim, and you will have no control at all. And luckily they bring in hypnotism and hypnosis with that idea of no control over somebody, but also leaving their ability to think clearly because of the surgeries that happen, but also because of the reasons behind it, just to control, to have 100% control over someone and give them no willing freedom or choice. That is damn scary because it's a real idea. When you get older, the fantastical or fantasy element of horror is the suspension of disbelief is through the roof with that. But when you bring in a real idea with real horror and with real terror, this idea could happen, that scares you. That puts over fear way more than some googly-eyed CGI monster popping out of the shadows and using special effects to be... Granted, there was one other movie that did it okay later on in the year. This is what still got down what it means to be in a creepy environment, to be in an uneasy environment, all made by a guy who does comedy. That is the most shocking fact of this entire goddamn year.
Well, you know, there's a fun theory about how comedy is like conceptually the same thing as horror, just at least in terms of how you achieve it. It's just that the end result is different. You either scare the person or you make them laugh. So
it's funny that you say ha ha ha. Sorry. It's funny that you say that because one of the forever ideas of comedy is that comedy is based off misery. Horror is also based off of misery and pain. So if you add the positive, well, just add the positive element of, well, to misery with comedy, then you just have the perfect counterbalance of misery plus pain and negative emotions, which is horror. And they pull this again. This is so simple. It's simple with just a race differential between two significant others meeting their family, but haha, instead of them being awkward relatives, they turn out to be sociopathic and psychopathic monsters.
let's just say I like the twist where it's not that we hate black people. We love black people. That's the problem. They really, really love black people.
Yes, and well, to an extent, that is also terrifying. The idea that these controlling people, these supposedly successful, well endowed and intellectual people, can have the same psychopathic tendencies and just overall rage-filled, and not necessarily rage-filled or hate-filled tendencies, but also ways of getting what they want, how they want, and to cover it up. That's just another terrifying element to how good this premise is, how the script is, and granted, this was supposedly gonna be a horror comedy, and when you think horror comedies, you think of Gremlins, Krampus, Shaun of the Dead, where there's actually like full-blown comedy.
I really think calling this a horror comedy is false advertising.
That is absolutely, because
it's barely any comedy in this.
If anything, there's only like a blip or two of satirical comedy with our lead character and his friend accomplice.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, other than that, and the action is still really good too. With the also good action, investment. We are so invested in this one guy trying to survive this literal nightmare, and just any means, literally doing anything to survive. No matter what like gruesome needs you need to go to, there is also there will always be a nightmare trailing you until you reach the white light, or in case the headlights of a car with an accomplice in it.
Ooh. All right, not bad. Oh, okay. So my number 2 is Baby Driver. It's probably no surprise at all this was on my list. But might surprise a few people that it's not my number 1, and I think the reason for that is just that it's not surprising to me at all. This movie is as good as it is. Once you see it's Edgar Wright, how can it be bad? And I know that sounds fanboyish of me. You think I'm a Christopher Nolan fanboy. that ain't nothing compared to my thoughts on Edgar Wright.
Hey, I don't know if it was necessarily you, but this guy will always be an Edgar Wright fanboy. Mostly because, it was influence from you, but I did find a bunch of his stuff on my own, and I do not regret a minute of it.
Right. Nothing, I really can't think anything less of the guy, because none of his movies have been anything but spectacular. So, that's, you like people who do good things.
Who are consistent!
Consistently, yeah. So, with Baby Driver, Edgar Wright here tries to create something very different. It's sort of this action movie jukebox musical. to say this movie has a godlike soundtrack is not doing it justice. All the music is synchronized to the action, thanks to our main character's obsession with keeping music on him at all times. You know, Baby himself is a really nice change of pace from the usual action movie star. He's not a stoic meathead. He's very human in his portrayal, whether he's taking care of his foster father or flirting with diner waitresses. And the romance that ensues is better than most full romantic movies that I've seen, which just shows the level of competency on display here. And thankfully, the supporting cast, too, is equally as enjoyable, and the best thing about them is that they're not just meant to be funny and nothing else. You know, when they want to be endearing or intimidating, they can be. And I feel like the moment that best describes this is with one sort of very minor character. Baby's talking to a newly hired gunner, and he's like, "Hey, nice tattoos." I'm like, "Thanks. This one used to say hate, but I blacked out the E to increase my chances of getting a job." It's like, how's that working out for you? Who doesn't like hats? It's that kind of meticulous writing that makes Edgar Wright's films so legendary.
Well, it's so specific and quirky, but the reason that it's quirky and it works is because it combines the realization of that level of body art. It can be repulsive, even though you think it's great, and then throwing in the idea, yeah, I just blacked this out. It's simple. Why don't people? And then punchline. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess it goes without saying too that the action is fantastic. You know, the car chases especially, I think, are some of the best I've ever seen. And yeah, Edgar Wright just seems like the kind of director who can handle any genre that he wants, and it's best just to let him do his thing, which is why I'm still mad at Marvel. They didn't let him make Ant-Man, but whatever. Yeah, Baby Driver, it's great. There's not a whole lot to say. It's Edgar Wright. You can't go wrong with that. If you haven't seen this movie yet, what the hell are you doing? Get going.
Either that or bug your significant other or parents or whatever to buy it for you. Buy this for me as a gift. It's a good action movie. And more than one person thinks it's a good action movie too, because Baby Driver is also my number 2 pick. Yes. Who would have thought? 2 Edgar Wright fanboys picking one of the same movies for the year. But hell, I can't help it. This was awesome. Just being able to sit back and watch a good, solid action movie take place. Mm-hmm. Well, again, it's a simple story. It follows the adventure. Well, you could call them adventures. Mm-hmm. Of an amazingly good driver, and well, luckily through good pacing and good plot structure, we slowly get to know this guy a lot more, and he doesn't even need to say that much. Ansel Elgort, he is actually a very good actor, even though he's already signed on to a contract with one of Hollywood's biggest agencies. Like, literally, he's already an A-list star, and he's only a few years older than us.
Nice.
Shows where we're at in life. But in all seriousness, he is great in this. His performance is very good, mostly because he has good stage presence. He has a good way with the camera. Luckily he also has good facial expressions too. When you see he's serious, he's fucking serious. And also whenever he says stuff, it means something. Granted, that does go down to the dialogue of the writing, but still, he can say this stuff. He can say not just say stuff. You say stuff when you're just yelling. When you're actually speaking and conversing, like this movie shows very well, the conversations that they have in this are actually real, legitimate things that people would say to one another. It's just talking, and they're not trying to. Well, granted, Ansel Elgort and Lily James, who, oh my god, I want her so bad. She is the perfect. Well, I said this in the video. This is the perfect combination of adorable and very attractive. She is such a likable person in this. She's happy, she's bubbly, she's giggly. Granted, some might say that would make her a bit of a boring character, but luckily she's also a perfect foil for a quiet but still well-meaning and well-endearing protagonist. They still have great chemistry because they choose the right words to say. That's one big thing I wanted to get to. Everyone's words in this do mean stuff. They mean stuff subtly. They mean it with many forms of actually meaning. Wow. Do I sound pretentious or what?
No, I get what you're saying. It's kind of what I was saying earlier. It's that kind of meticulous writing that makes Edgar Wright's movies so legendary.
Knowing what to say, what situations to portray to an audience, and Edgar Wright, you're beautiful, baby. You're beautiful. Keep up what you're doing. He is so good. He might be one of the only directors that I'm a fanboy of. Aside from, I'll have to look back and think about my fanboyness for the next few weeks, because, yeah, so far the only one I have is Edgar Wright. Every single one of his movies, I can just sit back and enjoy the action, and again, the action in this is great. There are gunfights, there are car chases, the music that they have for everything that's shown. They show people getting shot. They show fight scenes. They actually do also show a great way to do proper parkour action. Everyone sees the compilation videos on like YouTube or Facebook. You've seen parkour done, right?
Yes, I have.
It's very impressive, but when you can actually put a thematic element to it, when you can put a vision and a purpose to it, it looks amazing. Which Edgar Wright, he has all the purpose and all the vision in the world. So
he really knows exactly what he's doing in every moment.
It's serious, it's fun, it's intense, it's suspenseful. And luckily they don't go for a cookie cutter ending. It's taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much fun. It's well-meaning, well-endearing, just like its protagonist. It also has great supporting performances. John Hamm is a good, creepy thug, as well as Jamie Foxx just being an antagonizing asshole.
A Mr. Blue of the movie.
Jamie Foxx would be Mr. Blue? No, he'd be Mr. Blonde.
Is it Blonde?
Yeah,
whoever Michael Madsen's character was.
Michael Madsen was Mr. Blonde.
Oh, okay.
Bing! But, yes, he's definitely... That's a very good analogy. I did not think of that. But yeah, Jamie Foxx is great, but rest in peace Kevin Spacey's reputation, but Kevin Spacey was great in this. He was one of my all-time favorite actors. But yeah, everyone acts great, it looks great, the story's great, it's just great.
Great. Woohoo! Before we get to our number one, let's just go over a few honorable mentions. You want to start us off?
Why not? One of my honorable mentions is It. And even though we had a bit of a disagreement when we originally saw this in the theater, and granted, it's not perfect, and that's why it's not in my top 5, but I cannot stray away from the fact that I had a damn good time while I was watching this movie. And just to think, I also enjoyed the idea that it was a revisionist take on an already cemented miniseries, and trying to make a movie based off of a 6-part miniseries seemed crazy, and that they were able to fit it into one motion picture. But granted, that's why you also have sequels. But I still had a good time watching this. Pennywise, when he wants to be, is actually pretty creepy. And despite some of the time where he looks goofy, he is intimidating. And some people might detract that. But clowns aren't scary. For me, clowns will never be scary. unless in this it's purposefully scary, but I've never been scared of clowns in my entire life. Hell, I was a clown when I was in frickin' preschool. But yeah, the kids were great. Some of the scenes had a little bit of misdirection to them, but I liked the kids enough. I liked the even a handful of the supporting characters. The environment and atmosphere did take itself seriously, aside from the times where it was really goofy. You guys can't see my legs, but I was trying to do this stupid dance that he does near the end. But other than that, it was nice to look at, despite some of the... They were both good and bad computer visual effects. The good ones outweighed the bad, and overall, it wasn't a painful time. You want to go back and forth? Or
No, you just do all yours and I'll do all mine.
Another one of my mandatory honorable mentions is Star Wars The Last Jedi. Yes, I still had a good time while watching this. Yes, it is messy with its story structure, I personally felt, but I love Star Wars. I still will love Star Wars. Hell, I like The Phantom Menace. This isn't even close to... Well, if I like the worst of the Star Wars movies, I'm gonna like anything that Star Wars produces, except for maybe the Clone Wars, because possibly that's even worse. But yeah, I had fun with The Last Jedi. It was good eye candy. It was when they did have their change of mythos, and when they did try and take in real ideas, it was actually pretty interesting. But even though some of the twists fell flat, I still had a decent time while watching it. They are trying to expand, and they are trying to add to an already cemented and established series. So I appreciate it for trying to take risks. Some of them not working, but some of them, yes, working, I guess. And one of my last ones is some of you might have actually thought you've forgotten this, but Kong Skull Island. Even though some of the main characters had story elements taken away from, and the director of this, Jonathan Vogt Roberts, I think his name is, or Jonathan Jason, whatever, he actually appeared on his own honest trailer for it and complained about, and voiced his complaints about the production of that movie. But I had a good time with it. It was a monster movie that had decent and good effects. It had a good amount of suspense. It was entertaining. Plus, also, I said from that video, Tom Hiddleston has A-list presence in that movie, and hopefully he uses that onward. Brie Larson, you've already won an Oscar, but even though you are, I want you also. Now, your talent is... You do have drama talent. You can do action movies whenever. Focus on drama. But yeah, other than that... Oh, and it was a Straight Outta Compton reunion. Yeah, screw you. I'm laughing. But, yeah, there were likable elements. There were downright stupidly hilarious moments. But overall, I still had a good time while watching that. And, sort of honorable mention, Thor Ragnarok. It was alright. It was okay. Entertaining, simple, and it worked. But not one of the goddamn best movies of the year. I have a better stance on Marvel than he does, but I'm still a damn skeptic of what Marvel both can and can't do. Ragnarok, alright, not amazing.
Alright, well, a few of my honorable mentions, I'm just going to go over pretty quickly. I mean, this was a really good year, so I couldn't fit everything on the list, but I'll just quickly go over the ones I felt worth mentioning. There was Okja, which was a Netflix original movie. This was made by Bong Joon-ho. Again, I don't know how to pronounce the name, I'm sorry. But
We're Americans, we only know American.
But it was the same guy who made Snowpiercer. Admittedly, this movie can be fairly heavy-handed in its message. but it harkens back to the days of kid adventures of like the 80s and 90s, and the good ones with like a little bit of that extra edge to it. For that, I really liked it, and I felt it was worth mentioning. And if you have a Netflix subscription, give it a watch. The other one is War for the Planet of the Apes. Now, this is...
No, sorry. I keep on... Well, we saw so many movies. That's also one of my honorable mentions. I loved that movie.
Okay.
Loved it way more than Dawn.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect. There's a major logic gap between it and the previous one, but it still manages to pull ahead as the best of the three and is a pretty good movie in its own right. I've really never seen a movie trilogy turn itself around so much by the end of it.
Even though there's less action than Dawn, that plays to its benefit, and it focuses on the best elements, which are the apes. Andy Serkis, great. The focus and direction, better than the last one. I actually felt meaning for apes that were, well, CGI apes.
The other honorable mention would be Get Out. For me, I think this was hyped up for me a little bit too much, and it wasn't really what I was expecting. Remember when I said a horror comedy is a very false advertisement for this movie?
Yes.
But that being said, for what it sets out to do, it does pretty good. It's more like a feature-length Twilight Zone episode with a little bit of social commentary on interracial relationships. Mm-hmm. So, still pretty good and definitely worth checking out. Then we got Kong Skull Island, also an honorable mention for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not the most highbrow movie of the year, but for being a giant monster B movie, it's well done.
It's a giant monster B movie. It's all right.
And it avoids being stupid, which I think is important for me.
It avoids being really stupid. Yeah. Like there are points where it becomes laughably dumb, particularly around Sam Jackson.
Well, stupid comes in many forms too. I mean, it doesn't. Let's say it doesn't turn into a Marvel movie.
God damn it! Will we?
But especially too, it just reminds me of my childhood. It makes me feel like a kid again, watching Godzilla movies with my dad. Overall, a fun time. And my last honorable mention, I'm going to give it to. Sorry. Shut up. And my last honorable mention I'm going to give to is Dunkirk. If we're going based off of experiences this year, that may easily have been in my top 5. But
you really liked it that much?
Yeah. But the thing is all the ones on my list are movies you can watch are as amazing no matter where you watch them. Dunkirk was a movie made for the theaters. If you saw it in theaters, then it's fantastic. But if you see it anywhere else, it's just good. So
I still think it's a little bit overrated, but absolutely nothing bad. I just thought for me, I thought it was a bit overhyped. And granted, I've become a little bit skeptical of Christopher Nolan ever since Interstellar. He still is an incredibly talented filmmaker who does understand like how to set up both a visual spectacle as well as challenging and compelling ideas. The problem with me was that, yes, there is less dialogue, but a lot of Nolan movies are dialogue-centered. That can be both good and bad. I saw the badness of it in Interstellar, and because of the lack of dialogue, I'm not saying that all like dramatic action pieces need to have talking. For me personally, I just find that it's easier to like get invested into a character when you can actually hear what they say. That's not in any way like saying that this was terrible, but I still just felt more for like the characters I could actually listen to. That's why I like Tom Hardy the best in it, because you could actually hear him communicate with everybody. Yes, you're supposed to be immersed in the main protagonist and literally be in his shoes. But for me, that just made him seem a bit boring. But nonetheless, good movie. Okay. Can I just assume that your number one is also my number one? Blade Runner 2049. Yeah. Yes. Same. But how can you blame us? This was awesome.
When I was writing out what I wanted to talk about for this movie, I realized I was just bringing up a lot of the same things that I had already said. Like Wind River, it's shot so perfectly. It's got this intense, thick atmosphere to it. Like Logan, it's a beautiful and a breath of fresh air in a very stagnant genre. Like The Red Turtle, it's a very emotional journey that triggers real thoughts about life and your humanity. And just like Baby Driver, it is the product of a very, very competent director.
I.e. compelling.
Yes.
Absolutely. And behind the amazing vision of director Denis Villeneuve, that's how you pronounce his name. He's not freaking Mexican. He's French Canadian.
Oh, I just said Denis Villeneuve. So.
No, I made a big mistake in the video and I called him Denis Villanueva, thinking he was Spanish or something.
Well, regardless, that guy fucking knows his stuff.
Well, and also he's made such an impact with movies like Arrival. And do you know what he did
between
before
this,
that?
Arrival, and Sicario?
He directed Sicario?
Yes. He is on. I'm gonna be a fanboy to 3 different directors by the end of this year.
Wait, hang on. Wind River.
He didn't do Wind River. Taylor Sheridan wrote Sicario. But,
gotcha. Okay.
But Denise is what.
Hey, it's okay. It's okay. It's just that my mother's name is Denise.
Okay. He directed Sicario.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Very nice. And well,
just like
everyone loved that.
Yeah, it's just like he didn't direct Hell or High Water either, but he wrote it.
This was so good. That's one of the only ways you can put it. It's so good, and it.
Can I say one thing?
Go for it.
Okay, when I heard that they were making a new Blade Runner something, at first I think it was talks of it rumored it was a remake and then they changed it to a sequel. But I thought that's a fucking terrible idea. Okay?
Trying to mix principles of both.
Yeah. Well, or even just making a new Blade Runner anything's a terrible idea because Blade Runner's a movie you can't make nowadays. People are...
Yep, another one right here.
Yep.
Is it the final cut? Or is it one of the other cuts?
It's all the cuts.
You have every single cut of it.
This contains every cut of Blade Runner.
Oh my god.
I've only seen 2 versions of it. So
okay.
I don't think I've even seen the final cut.
Doesn't matter which cut it is.
Well, potentially it does.
Everyone says the one with the narration by Ford is kind of dumb.
I
it hurts it. Well, yeah, I think that's one of the other cuts.
Okay. Well, either way, Blade Runner is the kind of movie you can't make nowadays because we're in a completely different generation of people whose attention spans are as short as the time it takes to swipe your finger across their smartphone. We don't want movies that have the goal to demand our attention. Why do you think Marvel movies break the box office every time they release? If we were going to get a new Blade Runner, I thought for sure they were going to have to neuter it. Fast-paced, action-packed, probably lots of comedy and stupid, simple storytelling. Needless to say, I was wrong, and I couldn't be happier. I mean, not only does this movie understand exactly what made the original so good, but it does what any good sequel should. It doesn't fall into the trappings of a lot of late generation sequels where let's just copy what the first one does, or try to prey on people's nostalgia instead of actually coming up with new ideas. No, this one actually does expand upon the world. It brings to the table new ideas, new interesting things about the characters and the world, and that's what I love about it. Major props to the director behind this because he really did have a very, very good idea in mind.
That he definitely did, and hold on, Rick Sanchez. I don't think I don't think his statements are to the degree that he puts them, but we do live in an age of Hollywood where the easier the movie to make, the more marketable movie to make, the better your movie is. And granted, that has taken place with handfuls of different action movies as well as children's movies, because they can still easily hit the PG-13 demographic. One principle that Blade Runner sticks by is that you build your atmosphere. You build a world that is separate from your reality. But you can also bring relatability through the real ideas that you present. That is what Blade Runner has stood for in two different renditions made by two different people, but also holding the same idea. And that's what 2049. I wanted that movie for Christmas so bad, but
It's not even out yet.
It isn't.
No.
Oh,
It comes out maybe in 2 weeks.
when the hell ever. I still got Baby Driver, but 2049. It is so amazing to just sit back and look at, be in awe of it. For me, this is similar to an experience that one would have watching a big screen adaptation of 2001. Just sitting back and watching a spectacle, the story, the mythos, the real ideas, just everything about it. Well, luckily the script takes stuff seriously, but it also doesn't stray away from being imaginative and being creative. While still having an outline, you can make as much creative material as you want, because you still have a similar, well, not necessarily even the same premise, but you still have the same timeline. You have the same. Wow, does 2049 really share that much compared to the original? Mm-hmm. Is it okay? Well, I'm just thinking back and thinking you can point to so many specific things in 2049 that are starkly different, that are its own representation.
Right, but it's still instantly recognizable as, yes, this is Blade Runner.
Exactly.
That's the important thing about it.
Again, because they share a principle.
You don't want to be so different that you start to feel like a completely different franchise.
That is true, but you can also you can still be different while being familiar.
Mm-hmm. That's the best thing about this. We also have to talk for a second. I think we almost need a moment of silence for this movie. It was a box office flop.
So alright, I've had my time. Close my eyes, let the death bells chime.
And
That being said, it still made a profit.
it made a profit, but any studio executive's going to take one look at that number and go, damn it, I knew we should have sold out to Marvel.
Do you know what production company was behind this?
Warner Brothers.
That's right. And, well, actually not that they've been, like, failing or floundering for the last few years, or maybe even the last couple of decades, but to have all their effort go into this project is still pretty incredible, considering the reputation of the first movie being a box office bomb. But that's also because personally, I think the only reason that Blade Runner wasn't a huge hit was because it had so much competition. It had E.T.
Well, there was remember at the time, Star Wars was considered the pinnacle of sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone wanted to be worth their salt had to be trying to replicate what Star Wars was doing, and this one was so radically different. Everyone's like, "What the fuck is this?" So, and that's what's surprising to me so much is that Blade Runner retroactively has been labeled a masterpiece in the sci-fi genre that I thought for sure people would really want to support this movie. But maybe, I don't know, was their budget too big? Or
It was a very large budget for the time, and at the time it was also sort of a production nightmare considering the
No, I'm talking about 2049.
Oh,
Like, was their budget so high that the niche audience just couldn't bring it back?
that's a distinct possibility, but also considering that this Blade Runner was a flop. It made only like half of its budget at the time, but again retroactively over time made it back. With this one, I think there were a lot of people who were coming off of the nostalgia for Blade Runner, but that entire whole is sort of a niche market because this movie with both Blade Runner and 2049, they are like, God damn it, I don't want to sound pretentious, but I was going to say they're for a specific people. Mm-hmm. They're for film lovers who want to see a creative medium be creative. Be as visually like well, there are so many double meanings here.
Well, see, for me, more than anything, this is just the kind of movies that I would love to see more of.
Yes.
But with it being a box office flop, probably it's the last time we're ever going to see a new Blade Runner. But it's probably going to be a long, long time before we see a movie of this caliber ever again.
Think about the difference. 35 years.
Yeah.
So okay, well then let's predict the next... 49 plus 35. That's 84, is it? Yes, it is. So, oh my god. Blade Runner 2084. That's what we gotta look forward to in 2042. Holy shit. 2042. We're gonna be old as shit.
Okay.
Eh.
One last thing to lead people off on. Do you have anything else you want to say?
All I was gonna say is Blade Runner 2049, the mythos, the visuals, the atmosphere, the music, the pacing, and the investment. Just everything a film lover could ever want. And the acting, Ryan Gosling, who's gotten criticism from handfuls of people, thinking that he's a good-looking guy. He can say words nice, but he has a presence here.
Okay, those people I would immediately show La La Land and Nice Guys to.
No, but he is fantastic in this. Harrison Ford, with his limited time, he was also very good in this. Mm-hmm. Freaking Robin Wright, she's not even on screen that much. And Jared Leto, he's not on screen that much either. But you feel everything that happens because you want to know, where is this story gonna go?
Who was the opening guy again?
Dave Bautista!
Wait, he's a wrestler?
Yes! He's a former... He was a big-time wrestler.
Oh, okay. Because it's like, I still think about him. I think about the whole movie, but it's like his scene in particular, I really like. It's a really good opening scene.
It's in the beginning of a 2-hour and 40-minute movie, and you still remember it.
Mm-hmm. One last thing I want to leave off, or I'm sorry, I keep...
No. But all I can say, this movie... it's a breath of fresh air. It's visually pleasing. It's emotionally pleasing. It leaves you with twists and turns, suspense, action, and I don't even know if they use humor once in a while. But you can
They do occasionally.
Occasionally, like at points when you need it, and you can also feel joy and hope, and anything that they
feel a rainbow of emotions. Right?
Except not as gay. I'm just kidding. Well, honestly.
Can I say my last thing?
Go for it.
Okay. not many people know about this, but there's actually 3 short films that are supposed to lead into 2049. I mean, they're not required to see the movie, to like see or understand the movie, but they're really good short films in their own rights, and they're just here on YouTube. If you're gonna see one, make sure you see Blackout, because that was made by the same guy who made Cowboy Bebop.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think many people don't know about this, but they're so good, and really, just watch them all. Like I said, they're on YouTube, so watch them, and while you're at it, go see Blade Runner 2049.
Hell yes.
Well, and if you've already seen it, see it again, because it's that good.
And if you've already and if you're waiting patiently like we are, buy it.
I got it pre-ordered.
Lucky fucker.
I'm sorry. And quickly, here's a list of all the movies we didn't see of the year.
We can't see everything. We do not get paid for this.
Yep. Our time is limited, like everyone's.
But luckily we do take advantage.
Mm-hmm. So, any closing thoughts for the movie? Or, not movie, but I guess closing thoughts for the year.
I appreciated this year and what it provided. Granted, we didn't have necessarily too many dramas on our list. That didn't mean that we wanted to... That means that we didn't see, like, actually good dramas. But, again, fuck Hollywood for forcing everything in this year to come out in the last 5 fucking days! Like 3 or 4 Oscar contenders were out this weekend alone. What do you expect us to do with our time during the holidays? When we're supposed to be with family. Yeah, family can go see movies together, but not 3 in one short time span. Granted, this will never be solved or addressed, but I want to see dramas spread out through the year. Like, ones where, it touches home. Because, but then again, what touches home more than snow and holidays? Well, then again, for New Siberia, that would be half of the year. But other than that, I was still impressed. Still happy, and still hoping to see continuation of this through the next year. Stay tuned, and we'll have our top 5
worst of the year.
Because it's better for comedy. It's better to leave on something you can bitch about.
We'll see you then.
Oh, oh, oh.